Hello, my name is Mike and welcome to my love affair with showbiz. Today we're going to talk about the king, or should I say the kings. Actually, there were two kings in entertainment and I don't think has been a third since. Now, do you guys know what I'm talking about? Because you should. The one is in music and one is in movies. Okay, did you get it? It's like a Jeopardy question, huh? First one, Clark Gable. He was the king. Ironically, or maybe not ironically, Ed Sullivan in the 30s, he was a columnist before he had the Ed Sullivan Show. And he did this thing in the 30s of the King and Queen of Hollywood. I don't think it lasted 3 years. But the first year was big. Clark Gable was named the King of Hollywood, and the female was Myrna Loy. Clark Gable, interesting man. He was called the king. He was always thought of the king until he died in 1960. The last movie was The Misfits with Marilyn Monroe, but let's talk about Clark at his biggest. Okay, interesting life. He had as most of the stars back in the 20s and 30s, they came from squalor. They came from low income, had to work, probably dropped out of school, so they could make money for the family. Clark Gable came from a place like that. His first two wives were much older than him, and they helped in his career. The first wife helped him in the theater, where he actually did not any starring roles on Broadway. He is not known for anything he did on Broadway, but he was getting experience. Okay, then he gets to Hollywood, marries his second wife, who I believe was 16 years older than him. I may be wrong, very dowdy, but she believed in him, and they were married for quite a while. I don't remember how many years, and basically it was when he met Carol Lombard that obviously the marriage was over. But Clark Gable, very career-oriented. The studio system was great because they'd start out almost playing extras, then they'd get little parts, little speaking parts, maybe a line or two, but they were groomed for stardom. Most of the people obviously didn't make it, but those fortunate few did. Clark Gable was one of those. Oh boy, I don't remember the film he did. It was, I believe, 1932 with Norma Shearer, and he was physically abusive to Norma. Now, back in those days, it was, when I say physical abuse, maybe he took her arms and held them. There was no violence when it came to male-female stuff. But he was an ass to her, and the public loved it. He was virile. He mistreated her. He was macho. They loved it. So he started getting this career as being this macho guy. Very good. His early pictures are so wonderful to see because all of these people who became stars, it's wonderful to see their early work because you see their improvement. You see what they were learning. It's very interesting, and they were the ones who made it were very diligent. They did maybe 20 pictures before they had anything substantial, but they were determined. And Clark Gable was determined. Okay, so he starts doing these films. Joan Crawford was his best partner in films. They did something like 10 movies together, and they are all great. So Clark Gable was getting bigger and bigger, and I believe it was 1934 or 1935. He does this movie called Parnell. He was an Irish lawyer, and he had to have an Irish brogue. Okay, major flop. His reviews were awful, that nobody believed that he could be a lawyer, that he could be Irish, and he took it very much to heart. And at that time, he decided he's only going to play roles he's comfortable with. So he basically played the same role his whole career. But in that, he had some great movies. I mean, he got the Academy Award 1936, or I believe it was 1936. It Happened One Night. And that was MGM loaning him out. He was contracted to MGM Studios, but he actually made It Happened One Night at Columbia. And he got the Academy Award. He had the best writers, the best co-stars, the best production values. I mean, Clark Gable really was the king. And MGM was the king of all the studios. Everybody knew it. To work at MGM was, nothing was better to have a contract with MGM. Very second to MGM, but very low on the second was Warner Brothers. And then, you had the Universal and the RKO, and they were a little bad. And, they'd have great films here and there, but it wasn't consistent. Like MGM did, I believe, produced a movie a week. So we're talking about over 50 movies, and most of them are great. All the production values are wonderful. Okay, back to Clark. So, Parnell, okay, met Carole Lombard. They did a movie before, but there were no sparks or anything. But I think it was around 1938 where they got together. And it was one of the great love affairs of Hollywood, Clark Gable and Carole Lombard. She would be great for an episode of My Love Affair with Showbiz too. Carole Lombard was probably the most beloved actress of her time, cursed like a sailor, totally her own person, could do comedy, drama, very, very talented. She could be Clark Gable's equal. She was not somebody who was this mild little woman who, ooh, Clark Gable, let me kiss his ass every minute of the day I am married to him. No, she was very much her own person too. And they were such a attractive couple. They were just cute and wonderful, and they were so in love. Now, you couldn't live together back in the 30s. There was actually a moral clause in contracts that if the people who wrote up the contracts thought that you were morally indecent, you could be fired. Well, nobody was going to fire Clark Gable. He was the biggest moneymaker in the studio in the 30s. But still, you could not live together. They got married after Clark Gable did Gone with the Wind, which was big. Gone with the Wind was the biggest film probably Hollywood ever produced, except for the Ben-Hur, the silent Ben-Hur, and the Ben-Hur of Charlton Heston of the 50s. But Gone with the Wind, that was a biggie. So Carole Lombard was very patriotic. She loved Franklin Delano Roosevelt, loved, and they had met many times. She was very supportive of his presidency. She went all around the country trying to sell war bonds for the war, World War II. She was in Las Vegas. She was through with her war bond tour, which made millions of dollars. And to say millions of dollars today is major, because thousands of dollars back in the late 30s was a major deal. So to make millions, this was Carole Lombard. Basically all the celebrities did these tours to sell war bonds. And of course I have to mention Judy at this time, because she went anywhere she was asked to sell war bonds. And she could sing and she can dance. She was a lot of fun to have on those little tours. Okay, back to Clark, even though I'm talking about Carole now. Okay, Carole was going to take a plane back to L.A. Obviously, the war bond tour was over. But she missed Clark. She missed her hubby. And the plane wasn't going to leave for who knows how long. So she took a private, small plane. And unfortunately, that plane hit a mountain. Everybody died instantly. Her mother was also on the plane. So she was killed instantly, which was major news. I believe it was 1938. Clark Gable flew to Las Vegas immediately in those mountains to see if they could find her. And they never did. They found remnants of the plane that were, little pieces. So sad. So sad. And then Clark Gable enlisted in World War II and was piloting a bomber jet. People said that he was maybe suicidal because he was so distraught over the death of Carole. Who knows? He was very successful in the war, though, because obviously he didn't die. He comes back. It was a big deal. Oh, God, the first movie he did was with Greer Garson. And it was a funny cliche on the advertisement of the movie. Gable's back and Garson's got him. Something like that. Actually, they didn't get along at all on the film. But he came back, still did his stuff. Still during the 50s. Now, he was a heavy drinker, but he wasn't a drinker that lost his career because of his substance abuse. There's a difference. Many people did, but not Clark. Okay, so now we're going all the way to 1960. I kind of segued kind of fast with the Misfits. That Arthur Miller wrote, Marilyn Monroe. He wrote it for Marilyn Monroe. His wife, at the time, by the time the Misfits was done, they were well divorced. It was a great part. He lost 20 pounds. He had gotten a little, beefy. Let's call it beefy. He wasn't really fat, but he definitely had gained weight through the years. But he lost a little weight. He knew this was a great part. You know, he's not stupid. God, he'd been in the films, 30s, 40, it's just like 30 years. He knew his stuff. So he's doing the Misfits, and he's doing all his stunts, which he loved doing. So he died right after he filmed all his scenes and before the movie came out. His wife, who I believe was his fifth wife, was pregnant. And we would think that it was his first child, but actually it wasn't. Back in the 30s, he did a movie, I believe, called Call of the Wild. I could be wrong about that. With Spencer Tracy and Loretta Young. Well, Loretta Young and Clark had an affair, and she got pregnant during the filming of that. She had her baby, and very interestingly, she took a trip to Europe, and when she came home with an adopted child. Well, it actually was her child, but of course, you would lose your career totally if you had a baby out of wedlock. You did not have it, but Loretta wanted this child. Clark Gable was not a part of his daughter's life. Okay, but he did have the daughter. Very sad. But to the end, Clark Gable was the king. It was the name that was given to him, and it never faltered, and nobody ever took his place. Okay, so that's Clark Gable in a nutshell. Now we're going to go to the other king. And of course, I would think all you people who are watching would know who the other king was, because he's still thought of as the king. Clark Gable, most young people don't even know who he is. But this other king, everybody knows who he is. So do you know who it is? Okay, I'll tell you, because I can't hear you on the other side. Elvis Presley. So, Elvis Presley, of course, the king of rock and roll. Now, Elvis Presley did not invent rock and roll, which is a funny way to put it. He made rock and roll legitimate. That's what Elvis Presley did. And that can't be denied. In the 50s, you had the Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, and Chuck Berry. They were really the founders of rock and roll. But it was Elvis that people really started buying the music. We all know Elvis Presley music in the 50s. It is great. It is so raw. It's amazingly sexy. And let's face it, Elvis Presley had the looks that his contemporaries didn't. He was just gorgeous. And that doesn't hurt when you're in the visual arts. Okay, so he's doing his music. It was great. He did Love Me Tender was his first movie. Once they saw the rushes, they could see that Elvis had a presence as a screen actor. The only song that was sung in the movie was Love Me Tender, which of course we all know that was one of his greatest hits. So the movie was called Love Me Tender. Very good. He did maybe 2 more movies before he was drafted. He very much was serious about being an actor. You can go to YouTube, all of the interviews in the 50s, he is saying he wants to act. He wants to get really good as an actor. And he showed a lot of promise. He really did. I mean, the guy was really talented. Gorgeous and musical. That's a lot. Okay, so then he was drafted, which was a major big deal at the time. In fact, a show and movie was made from it called Bye Bye Birdie. So he's stationed, I believe it was Germany, and that's when his mother died. And that was the event of Elvis Presley's life that changed everything. He was very close to his mother, very close. He wanted to get famous so he could support his mother, buy her a nice house. He was also close to his father. And his father and his mother were married. There were no divorces. But his mother and Elvis had a very tight relationship. It's believed that Elvis started doing his pills during the stay in Germany, in the army. When he came back from the army, all right, his mother had died. He had dyed his hair. His hair was kind of a dark red before. And he looked fine, but it looked like, and I believe this is true, he got a nose job and he started dyeing his hair black. And, not that I'm big on plastic surgery, but he looked great. He really did. Interestingly, when he came back from the army, the first TV show he did was on a Frank Sinatra special. So him and Frank sang together. Not very, a little incompatible, but that's how he kind of came back. Now, the Elvis before he went to Germany is not the Elvis who came back. Colonel Tom Parker was his agent, who knew that Elvis could be the biggest thing since white bread. He knew it. And his whole push was to get Elvis more famous than just a popular singer. So we got him into these movies that we all know. We've probably all seen 1, 2, or 10 of them. They suck. They are awful. And they made money. So Elvis, he was getting into the drugs after the war. After maybe the first 2 or 3 pictures when he came back, he knew that he didn't have to make an effort. They were very easy. Elvis was not only losing himself in these movies, but he was really, really getting into the drugs. Not the drugs of the 60s, the pot, the acid, but they were the prescription drugs, the uppers, the downers, really getting into it. Okay, so thankfully those movies ended. God, the last movie is you have to see it. It's hilarious because Mary Tyler Moore is in it. Change of Habit, it's called. And she's playing a nun to Elvis Presley. Don't ask. Okay, so then it's 68, and he has this TV show. That was, God, what was it called? Now we think of it as The Comeback. But it wasn't called that then. But it was so successful. I remember Singer produced it. I have the DVD of it. He went back to his roots. Oh, he was just great. And you can see this on YouTube. You can even buy the DVD. The Comeback Special of 68 was phenomenal. He was, well, to get the shallow part out of it, he was gorgeous. But musically, he was singing. Most, but not all of the songs were live. He had a great set where he's playing with the people, the musicians he played with in the 50s. It's just wonderful. And he went back to performing after that. He didn't do any more movies. I don't think he did one movie after that Comeback Special. See, I'm calling it the Comeback Special, even though it wasn't called that then. Okay, and then he started touring again. Now, the first tours, this is the funny thing about Elvis Presley. He was well into the drugs, and he was losing it he was losing himself. Not only was he gaining weight, but he lost his sense of self. He had, the Memphis Mafia, and unfortunately, they were there to only praise him. So nobody could tell him, Elvis, you're gaining weight, you don't look healthy, or these drugs are getting in the way of your performances. Because if they said that, they would be banned from his life. Immediately. Elvis would not hear anything about that. So he marries Priscilla, and they have they have intercourse for the first time. I know this sounds so crass, I'm talking about sex and intercourse, but there's a difference because they fooled around before, but they did not have intercourse. All right, so Priscilla gets pregnant on their first time. And of course she has Lisa Marie. All right, now Priscilla talks about this in her book, but for some reason it's not common knowledge that after she gave birth, Elvis stopped having sex with her. He had this thing about mothers, and it came from mother issues, where he thought of Priscilla not as a sexual being, not as a wife, but as the mother of his daughter, and he didn't have sex with her. When Priscilla divorced him, she got the worst publicity because you're divorcing the king? Oh, no, no, no. Nobody, under every circumstance, nobody divorces the king. But she did. She, for obvious reasons, she didn't feel wanted. She talks about it. Her book is great. Elvis and Me, I believe the book is called, and it's a great read. She talks about how the Memphis Mafia were there all the time. She never really had privacy with him. And she really loved him. She really would have devoted her life around. And they were very close until he died. That relationship never ended. Elvis could never figure out why she divorced him. Well, two reasons. Number one, she wouldn't have sex with him. He wouldn't have sex with her. And number two, he had affairs all the time. By the time Priscilla divorced him, he was really a shell of a man. That's when he started gaining the weight. You know, there's certain clothes you wear to your body type. The pantsuits with those gigantic belts, this is Elvis, and the sequins and the gems and whatever was sewed in, it just accentuated his weight. So he's gaining weight. He's very lethargic during his concerts. It's really something to see, and you can do this on YouTube, where maybe a concert is taped, and he's so out of it. I mean, he can hardly move. And sometimes when he moved, he's doing these karate things. He was kind of into karate, which didn't quite work with the rock and roll stuff he was singing. But during this concert, he'd have one or two songs that he was spot on. They were perfect. It was beautiful. He was totally connected to the words. But it wasn't consistent. And then, of course, he dies. He was only 42. You know, people think Judy Garland was in her 60s when she died. She was only 47. Elvis Presley was only 42. So sad. And, of course, his legacy has only grown since he died. Graceland generates millions of dollars a year. And Elvis recordings are still, not only is his music still selling, but RCA is still bringing out new compilations, which is very good. Okay, so isn't it interesting? We have the two kings, Clark Gable, who didn't sing, Elvis Presley, who really wanted to go into acting, but that didn't work out. Interesting, but they're still the kings. Okay, so thank you for watching my love affair with showbiz. Take care, folks.